Hello everyone and welcome to Blank First Page. My name is Lucas. This video is all about field notes, specifically my love for field notes, the years of anticipation and compromises until I was able to get my hands on my first set. I'll also talk about the exact first set that I bought, which is this one right here, which is the standard issue craft paper field notes set. This particular set is a mixed page. One's blank, one's lined, one's graph paper. So we'll get a bit of a flavor for what each one is like. As I talk about in some of my other videos, I started getting into stationery somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago. And at the time, I lived in Malta. You couldn't get anything but the whatever happened to be at the school supply stores here pretty much, which were your normal legal pad type notebook, spiral bound things, and hard-covered notebooks. Nothing particularly special, nothing to get excited about, and certainly nothing to collect. But even so, my love for stationery was still there, and this was, I think, a few years after YouTube came around. The rest of how I got my sort of stationery brand fix, I think, was like through forums or Reddit. I don't know. I do remember there were Flickr communities, if anyone remembers that website, which had basically photos of field notes and other notebooks. But I would just spend hours scrolling through Flickr albums of field notes. So I really wanted a set of field notes. And I think I'd got onto like the field notes pages from looking at a Flickr album about moleskins, and then there was like the recommended pages or albums, and there was a field notes one. And instantly this thing just appealed to me. You know, you've got a pocket size, thin notebook that it seemed like it was designed just to be used day to day. You know, there was nothing, it was very unassuming, pretty plain looking in a way, but just a bold logo and some practical information on the front just appealed instantly kind of to my soul. And that's where the germ of the obsession started. And for the longest time, it was literally, I was only able to scratch the itch basically by going onto these Flickr albums, because you couldn't get moleskins, let alone something even more niche as a brand. As field notes, you couldn't get any of that in Malta. So what I would do in sort of an attempt to try and get close to that, which I did with some of my other notebooks when I was trying to have a moleskin, or trying to have the experience of a moleskin, so that I could have the experience of a field notes. Every summer I'd go to some city, and I would always try and find a stationery store in the hope that the ultimate goal was that they would actually stock field notes. But I would find other notebooks that approximated field notes. They were never quite the same. But things like this. So this is just a moleskin pocket notebook, which is the plainest of plain. This one is just blank sheets. Because I knew what field notes looked like on the inside, I would try and have the same effect. Start, date, and location. Contact, my email. And there's a handsome reward awaiting, which is what you have written inside the field notes. But it's not quite the same. The texture of the cover is not the same. It's a bit of a more heavy duty cover. Obviously it doesn't have the 3 staples. It's actually, I think it's kind of the same size. The moleskin's a bit thicker and a bit wider. It's almost there, but it's not quite. It just didn't give me the same effect. I also had this, which is also from 2011. The brand is Fabriano, which is an Italian stationery brand. Apparently, since they've been making things since 1264. Sure, I guess. But this one was quite different. I mean, the only reason I bought it, the dimensions are nowhere near the same. It's both longer and skinnier. And also it's got the stitched instead of the stapled. So all of these were just a bit too kind of refined in a way. They tried a bit too hard with the covers. It didn't have that same everyday kind of appeal that field notes had. And this is just the power of the brand, because it was before like everything was on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, or Instagram. So it took me a while to find like the videos from Field Notes. They upload everything to Vimeo, so you don't get like the recommended videos. If you're watching stationary videos on YouTube, you don't get the Field Notes videos necessarily. So somehow in some forum or something, I stumbled upon the Field Notes video. I think it's called From Seed, where Aaron Draplin shares his collection of all these old farm seed and feed, or feed and seed. But these notebooks were basically given to farmers as a promo by the feed or the seed company, and they had the same aesthetic. They were just because they were a promotional item, they were kind of cheap. The graphics on them, on these notebooks that he shows, now they look cool, but at the time I'm sure it just was like I don't know, like getting a brochure today or something in the mail today, where you don't even look at the design and you kind of throw it away. Which he goes through his collection and he shows all of these notebooks, and that's kind of the sense you get from them. He even opens some of them up, it's just like scratchings in them, random numbers or random notes that it is not of any real significance what's written in them, but they are very significant notebooks because they represent, they would have been with an individual on a farm or with them throughout their daily life, day to day, which to me is actually much more appealing as a nice idea than, someone sitting down and writing their innermost thoughts in a nicely thought out way. Like just having a notebook that you use every day that just has random scratchings in it. I like that as a way of kind of representing someone's life. It's a nice kind of accompaniment to your life and your memories. But yet the physical field notebook, I just couldn't get to it. Wherever I was visiting, I'd gone to Field Notes website to see if there was a retailer of Field Notes close by. Because if there's a retailer that has Field Notes in there, it's a decent heuristic for finding a cool part of a town. So if there's a stationery store or some other retailer that stocks Field Notes, you're usually going to find pretty cool shops around there, good coffee shops, nice places to stay, nice places to eat, that sort of thing. So actually Field Notes have more than one benefit. So anyway, eventually in 2012, I moved to Sweden, and I was living close to Stockholm, about half an hour away. And on the weekends, I'd go into Stockholm. It was the first time that I'd moved away from Malta. I was actually living in a different country, so there were other things to explore. So it took me a while to actually remember I should look for Field Notes and see if there are any Field Notes retailers in Stockholm. And sure enough, there was one. And it was a store. I think it was a men's clothing kind of accessory store, and it was called Mr. Mud and Mr. Gold. And I remember that because it is one of my favorite Townes Van Zandt songs, and also because when I went in and tried to make small talk with the store clerk about how it's a cool name for a store, he was not interested at all in chatting to me about it. So that kind of was a memorable experience for that reason. But primarily it was a memorable experience because I got my first Field Notes. So it wasn't a stationery store. They didn't have all this choice, but they had like a few of the 3-packs. So this is what I got. This is the 3-pack, which is mixed. So there's one lined, one grid, and one blank. So these were number 1, 2, and 3 in my collection, which now runs very large. I'm currently on number 91 in terms of the one I'm using, and I've got probably another 40 maybe that are brand new and ready to be used. So finally I had my Field Notes, and there's just something about the standard pack with the craft. It is the embodiment of Field Notes. Plain, practical, very usable, very unassuming, but just such a joy to use. Most of all, I like the simplicity of the whole thing. You've got 3 staples is the minimum you can get away with to have like a very fully secure notebook. So 1 would be obviously wouldn't really do much, and 2 is kind of halfway there and doesn't ever look as appealing as 3 does either. There's something satisfying about having 3. And I remember once even I think like a Jack White interview from the White Stripes, he's talking about how he used to be an upholsterer, and like 3 staples is the minimum amount you need to secure like a piece of fabric to a couch or to a seat or something. So something about 3 staples is satisfying and kind of minimalistically complete. They each lasted about a month. I didn't use them in succession because I only had 3 at the time, and I didn't know when I'd be able to get any more. So I wanted to kind of pace myself and get longer term enjoyment and have more anticipation. Between using Field Notes, I'd use other notebooks just so that I could anticipate and get excited about using the next one that was coming up. But anyway, there's my love letter to Field Notes. They are definitely not paying me to say any of this. All the Field Notes that I've bought, like I've shown, I paid for them with my own hard-earned cash, but I just love using them. I carry one around all the time. It goes with me when I walk my dog, to the grocery store, to work. When I travel, wherever I'm going, I've always got a Field Notes with me. Sometimes I don't even have a pen, but I have my Field Notes with me because you can always like even scratch something in if you need to. Just a few notes about them, I guess. The cover is some form of craft paper. I'm not typically into all the tech specs of notebooks. I go much more on how they feel, how they are, what they're like to use, with the types of pens that I like to use. Field Notes are a great notebook to use for any kind of pen. I've used all sorts of pens in them, and they hold up well to everything, including fountain pens, even if sometimes they feather or they bleed a bit. This is an everyday notebook, so it doesn't really matter if it's not quite pristine, which is another thing about Field Notes, is that they make you want to use them because you don't have to be precious about them. In fact, they're almost designed to be thrown around and hard wearing. Anyway, that's sort of what I take them to be. In terms of which one to go for, I will always go for a graph or a dot grid if I can. Blank is too much freedom for me. I need a bit of structure. Otherwise, anything I write on there is definitely going to look like a mess. Lines I don't like because it's not the type of thing I do. I don't tend to write sentences as notes or anything like that. But a grid, you can write across, and you can, if you need to, it doesn't really matter if you're writing diagonally or whatever. But sometimes when you need to do a to-do list or a grocery list, you've got some structure in there. And even if you're drawing a sketch, I do some woodworking. So if you need to draw a quick sketch, you've got something to go on. The grid gives you some guidance, and the dot grid is even better because it's just a suggestion of some guidance. But I use them all. This one I was using when I lived in Germany, so it has some of the subway tickets that I used to use. Here I did a pen test. I was still playing around with the idea of the blank first page, as you can see in these. This one is the origin story notebook. I started off with the lined one because I probably wanted to get that out of the way so I could move on to, say, the blank and the grid one, which I'd enjoy more. But this is the original one that got me hooked. You can see that from the start I've been using them heavily. They're very well creased. That crease is pretty typical of being stuffed in a pocket, a back pocket. The spine ages quite nicely. It starts getting all feathery and fluffy almost. They make the perfect coaster, and using a Field Notes as a coaster is one of the best things you can do to speed up that aging process. You only get about 4 weeks with the field notes. If you use them daily, typically that's what they last for me, 4 to 6 weeks. I try to speed up the wearing in process as much as I can so that they quickly become a lot nicer to the touch, sort of softer around the edges. They feel more used, they feel more practical, and they even sound even the sound of field notes is nice to me. If you're not a field notes user and you are thinking like you might want to be, or you'd like to try them out, I would strongly recommend you buy a pack, and I'd recommend you buy the mixed pack unless you already know your preference of paper layout, I guess, grid lined or blank, I mean. But the mixed 3-pack is a great way of getting you into the field notes life. Like I said, I use field notes every day. They feature heavily in my life, and they will feature heavily on this channel. So field notes, if you're listening, I am ready to talk deals. Everyone else, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoy hearing about field notes as much as I like talking about them. If you've got your own love stories to tell about field notes, please put them in the comments. I love reading about those things. If you're enjoying the channel, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.